internet broadcast of weather forecast to ships in the Western Pacific. We chased hurricanes and forecast them for the ships at sea, and it was use of technology that the military was developing. It was really incredible to be a part of that. Having spent 30 years in the lending industry, security of data has always been a concern, but I myself am a cybersecurity victim. I had a bank breach that was a remarkable bank breach, and through some luck and some knowledge of the industry was able to save myself, as it were. And so I want to talk to you all a little bit today about cyber, how to protect your businesses, and how to protect yourselves. So with that, we'll get down to brass tacks. In 2019, it was estimated that hackers attack every 39 seconds on an average of 2,244 times a day. What does that mean to you? Well, it means that as you move throughout your day, you will see at least one and possibly more than one artificial email looking for you to engage or download or share information that will give access to your systems. The largest increase to expense for the real estate industry in 2020 will be IT and cyber threat protection. Let me say that again in case you missed it. The largest increase to expense for running our business is the cost of protecting the business from cyber attack. So we're going to talk today about hacks, how they happen, and whether or not you're at risk. When we talk about cyber threats, the most important thing to understand is what's at risk. And the Federal Trade Commission defines that as two categories of information. The first is affectionately referred to in the industry as NPI, non-public information. Federal Trade Commission says NPI is anything that's personally identifiable financial information. That includes the things that can't be Google searched, like your social security number, your bank account or access PINs and passwords, your complete account numbers. I'm sure you've all seen your credit card numbers or your bank account numbers redacted, where they're XXXXX in the last 4 digits. Your income information, your medical information, your account balances. The easy definition of that is that it's information that can't be located in a normal Google search. Now I laugh because I've got some young teenage friends who tell me that they can find social security numbers in 3 clicks. They base that on the Equifax breach. They tell me that in the dark web, it only takes 3 clicks to pull a social on anybody out there. Isn't that wild? Personally identifying information is information that can be used on its own or with other information to identify, contact, or locate a single person. So your PII is the stuff that's easily Googleable. Your name, your date of birth, your maiden name, your parents' names, your names of your pets, your phone numbers. I laugh because personally identifying information is also known as every Facebook question and answer you've ever posted or test you've taken, right? It's the fun data like the name of your first pet, the color of your first car, the things that you would typically use as security question answers or password protection. So you ask yourself what happens. Records are stolen, and then they're used one of 2 ways. The records are either used to access your account. The most common episode that you'll hear about in this case is gas station skimmers, where they pull your magnetic strip data from your debit card. You enter your PIN. That data is transmitted to a Bluetooth device located nearby. They take that data, clone a card, and then go shopping with your debit card. That's the most common type of hack. The second type is when that data is sold on the dark web so that somebody else can clone or try to hack, break into your personal information. The goal in all of that is fast money. The more egregious thing that we're hearing about today are diversions of wires. Wires being diverted from closings from title companies are probably the most lucrative form of threat today. And so another big reason why we talk about that. When you move a piece of real estate, specifically a commercial piece of real estate, wire transfers can be fairly large. And if that wire can be diverted away from its intended source and then diverted again offshore so that the money can't be recovered, that's a pretty big payday. And so now you kind of understand the why that it's happening. When we talk about what happens, there are several ways that a hacker will use to break into your data. Malware is the first and most common. And that's where a piece of software is downloaded onto your computer or your device, and it'll copy and transmit your keystrokes. Malware is used to create the ability for the hacker to see what you're entering and where you're entering it. The goal may be to get into your personal systems, but more commonly it's to get into big databases. If you use Buildium or Salesforce, or if you store a client's personal data in a large database, then they're looking for that hack into the database so that they can share that data everywhere or sell it on the dark web. Phishing is commonly used in email, and phishing is where they try to get you to give up your passwords or your identifying information. We smile and say that phishing is every email you've ever gotten telling you your Netflix account has been compromised and to re-enter your data, or that your Apple ID has been compromised and could you confirm your data? Social engineering, or the Facebook phrase, is getting you to disclose your security questions or your access hints so that your passwords can be guessed. Again, one of the largest episodes or evidences of social engineering would be all of the Facebook quizzes where you talk about all of the fun things in your life that feed back to your passwords, like the name of your pet or the color of your car. Corporate breaches and systems breaches are just that. They're the breaches where private company data, where your NPI is revealed. The most recent, very quiet corporate breach happened with, which company do you know? It was Facebook. All of your passwords, et cetera, were compromised, and that's why a whole lot of people are seeing their accounts be cloned or their apps get hacked. Systems breaches, huge systems breaches. The IRS is the biggest example of that. When the IRS was hacked, tax data was released. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about hacks. When the money is gone, how is it recovered? Insurance claims or law enforcement interdiction are the only two ways that it can be recovered, and law enforcement only is effective inside the United States, inside our shores. Most often when the money is moved, it's moved not once but twice and very rapidly. And once the money's offshore, it cannot be recovered. And so insurance claims is the remaining option you have. When we talk about why we care, the effects on your customers and clients, the cost of the loss is insurmountable sometimes. When we see wire fraud, especially in residential real estate, if that's somebody's down payment, 9 times out of 10, they were not insured. So when the wire is gone, it's gone. And the ability to repeat the transaction or to replace that money can sometimes be very difficult. The cost of controls passed on to clients. I don't know if the cost of your insurance, your E&O, the things that you pay for has increased in the last year, but if it has, probably 90% of that increase had to do with additional cyber coverage. And then liability in a breach. The unfortunate piece of all of this is that when somebody goes to file a suit in recovery, liability tends to spread to every party involved. And so when we talk about liability in a breach, Equifax cost secured today is estimated at $4 billion. and there were 149.7 million consumers affected. Cyber threat definitions you should know. There's no sense in me reading all of these to you, and I'm sure that Texas Realtors will give you all a copy of this deck when we're done. The trick of it is knowing kind of what you're looking at, though, when we talk about it. Wire fraud, in its easiest definition, is the diversion of a wire from its intended purpose. Hypo squatting is a fun word to say, and what that means is a misspelling or an intentional variation in a domain for the purpose of attracting you so that you think it is the correct domain. I'll show you an episode of that just briefly. When you get an email and it looks like it came from somebody that you do business with, if you hover over that email address, sometimes you will find typo squatting, where the email is just almost right, but there looks to be a typo in it. That's one to be very aware of. When we talk about the types of hacks that can happen, distributed denial of service or direct denial of service, can you imagine how aggravated you would be if you got to the office this morning and your system wouldn't log on? If you were denied service to that system, the multiple listing service as an example, for more than 3 days, what would it cost your business personally? If LoopNet didn't work for you for several days, what would that hinder in your business? Hackers will sometimes take down those systems and hold them for ransom in order to inspire the transaction of funds. So that's something to know. When we get into specific points of vulnerability, the first thing to do is to know what devices you have that are able to be hacked. What do you own? What are you holding that can be gained access to, or that your system can be seen through? So the first thing we usually talk about is your computer. Most all of us carry laptops or tablets these days. And if that laptop were hacked, copied, or cloned, is your password saved? Could they get into your system with access to your computer? What about just mirroring your Wi-Fi? Is your system at home absolutely safe so that nobody could guess your password or get in to see what you're looking at on your Wi-Fi? If your cell phone were stolen, do you have the appropriate security on your cell phone? I smile because I taught this class last week here in Austin, and one of the sweet ladies in the class didn't have any security on her phone, not even the bio identity data that Apple, she just swiped her phone and it opened. So we asked, can your cell phone be hacked? And then Bluetooth access. Credit cards and data skimmers that you see in gas stations can happen in multiple places. The fun thing of using Wi-Fi at Starbucks is to watch not only the Wi-Fi that you're on, but does anybody have Bluetooth access or try to gain Bluetooth access to your laptop while you're sitting there? Have you ever gotten the message pop up that says, so-and-so Bluetooth device would like to join you? If you don't hit the right denial of access to that, then somebody could Bluetooth into your computer and see what you're doing. We talk about defenses to basic threats. When you're in your Wi-Fi and somebody can log onto your Wi-Fi or into your printer network, most people will have security and passwords on their Wi-Fi, but they won't have security on their wireless printers. If you didn't put a password on your printer, when you go to print documents, I could be sitting in my car outside and see what you're printing. And so that's kind of an interesting concept. For a basic real estate contract, that might not make a difference. There's not really any NPI in the body of a contract. But if I am a property manager and I have rental applications and I'm sharing credit reports, then that is NPI. And if I print those off to take those to the landlord, then I've disclosed data and created a hackable moment? The answer to that would be to secure your networks, including your printers, requiring two-part authentication for access, to create passwords and phrases that are not easily identifiable by your social media, smart passwords, and to try not to repeat your password. This is the fun part where in a live class I ask everybody, how many of you have different passwords for everything that you do? And I smile because I'm eyeballing you all now. Raise your hand if you have different passwords for everything that you do. I was going to say, for those of you that didn't raise your hands, I'm smiling at you because once I've got one password, I've got them all. When we talk about malware and spyware in your software, how many of you run antivirus that runs an automatic scan on your systems more than once a week? That's a good thing. How many of you run antivirus on your phones? That's a good thing. To the gentleman in Dallas, I salute you. The fun piece of this is that probably 65% of all business people conduct business from their smartphone platform. That 65% that conducts business from their smartphone platform, typically only 10% of them have antivirus on their phone. Many of them believe that because they use Apple product, they don't have to have antivirus because Apple doesn't get hacked, right? The fun piece of this is that it's not that Apple doesn't get hacked. If they went through another platform to get your access, if they can see through malware, spyware, or software what your passwords were while you were playing in Facebook, then they may have access into your phone, which gives them access into other systems. And so that's the thing to be careful. When we talk about that, we talk about verifying your data and deleting anything that you didn't generate or solicit. The danger for those of us in real estate is that we typically want to touch every lead and you don't know where every lead comes from. So we have a great tendency to open things to see what they are in case that's a piece of business. And that's where a danger lies. So please make sure that you're looking at those questions. So, Kathy, that's an excellent question. Is the cybersecurity insurance that your broker provides cover an agent if they work from their home with their email address? And the answer to that question is going to be that you would want to check that specific policy. Many policies that brokerages cover will be limited to covering the brokerage in its official capacity. Smiling and using Keller Williams as a large example, if you're using your KW email, then you're covered. If you're using kathysellsrealestate@gmail.com, then you may not be covered unless the policy has the rider to extend to you. And so that's a conversation to have with the broker to be sure. When we talk about phishing and social engineering, the fun piece of this is that people will try to get you to give up, or I say people, hackers will try to get you to give up your data by asking you questions or reading your social media. Be really careful. Some of these things seem very real, but you should always verify. If Netflix sends you the email that says your account has been compromised and they need to verify your data, be sure that you watch for the spellings, for the time that that email was sent, for any verbiage out of context. For example, Netflix doesn't have broken English typically in their emails and marketing to you, and they won't have unexpected attachments. The fun piece of this with phishing and social engineering is if you don't know where it came from, call. I can give you some good antivirus for iPhones, and I will share that with you in just a little bit more, a little later in the deal. Let's talk about your email really quickly. and then we'll talk about cell phones. Acknowledging or replying to a spam email validates your address to the bot that created it. Many times a hack starts as a robot sending out to broad databases of emails what they call the phishing email. Not phishing PH, but phishing F, like trying to catch a fish. What they're looking for is active email accounts to attack. One of the simplest things we tell our teams are to keep separate email accounts. You have your business account. You have your personal email account that you typically would pay bills from or conduct your home and family business. And then you have a subscriptions email. That's the throwaway email. That's the one you give at Bass Pro when they tell you they're going to give you a discount for opening the card, or if you can please leave your email address at the store, those kind of things. The subscriptions email will also be the email that you use in your personal social media so that they don't have access to your other email accounts. Now, the fun piece for all of us is that we all have business Facebook pages, or we all have business Instagram pages. With those business pages, you're going to have that out there. So you just have to be very vigilant. Yes, ma'am, you can get a copy of the presentation. Sorry. You're going to limit who can see your bill paying email on your social media. The reason is that bill paying email is the one through which you want to be able to count on the most. That's the one where your debit card is going to be attached. You should use an antivirus program with internet monitoring. Maury, the answer to your question with internet monitoring that also will download to your phone, Kaspersky. Kaspersky is typically the most successful and the most reasonably updated. And we smile and say, use your hacking sense. When you get an email from the president of your company telling you that you need to reset your password access, and that email was sent at 3 a.m., is that likely? Oftentimes not. If you get an email from the bank, and the email from the bank says your account has been compromised and they need you to re-enter your account number, but that email came at 4 a.m., is that likely? Often not. Give you some examples of emails that do have hacks in them or create challenges. Some of them look very, very official. So here's the fun piece. Why would the Department of Labor need you to update records unless you had an active claim at the Department of Labor? And what kind of active claim would the Department of Labor investigate? Typically, Texas Workforce Commission would identify anything happening with inside the state that was payroll related. So while somebody may see that Department of Labor and think, oh my, I've got to update that immediately, it's not likely. Poor Netflix. Netflix is one of the most hammered entities when it comes to people trying to steal data. And what's fun is they're looking for your credit card data inside your Netflix account. The fun, your package delivery. If you didn't order anything on Amazon and you don't have any packages coming your way, then clicking on that tracking number could be a simple way for them to download malware to wherever you're clicking. The email looks really official. It's not. And then the fun of the things that do look very official. A subpoena in a civil case, but here's the catch. uscourts.com. How many government entities use a .com email address? None of them. But if you didn't know, you'd probably be clicking to see what the subpoena was about just in case it was real, right? Because that's a federal grand jury. That's scary. Just be careful and be aware. Use the tech that you have. So many of us will have Gmail accounts or personal accounts set up so that those things become portable. They live with us and not with the company that we're attached to. That's a brilliant strategy when it comes to controlling your database. and being portable, and a horrible strategy when it comes to ensuring that you don't exchange data unknowingly, that you don't inadvertently give somebody's information away. When you use secure encrypted email, anytime that you have NPI in an email, you should be protected. Encryption will give you an additional layer of security. We say use secure company email addresses whenever possible, and that's a twofold warning. That warning goes back to what we talked about making sure that the cyber insurance that covers your brokerage also covers you, the individual agent. It also feeds to the whole, be sure that you use the company's encryption system rather than no encryption. Most software entities will offer small business encryption. I'm going to show you that in 2 seconds. Your next opportunity is to use a virtual private network, a VPN. Restrict cross-access of apps on open network. How many of you have your work email open and your database system open at the same time you have Facebook open? That's cross-access of apps. Be careful with that. When we talk about encrypting your email, if you use Microsoft Office, Outlook, or Exchange, in any message that you compose, in the Options tab at the top line of that email, you can click More Options. There will be a button for security settings in the More Options, and then you can tell it to encrypt the message and click the attachments box. It will click then encrypt the message and its attachments. You can compose your message and then send. That's in Office, Outlook, or Exchange. If you don't use Office, Outlook, or Exchange, if you're just in a basic Gmail, in your Gmail email as you type it, and I'm sorry, this is so dark, I couldn't find a way to get the box open and the back not be dark. But in the bottom of every Gmail email, there is a lock with a clock on it. As you type your email, if you'll click on the lock with a clock, it'll open the confidential mode. And you can set the confidentiality. You can also set that it requires a passcode, where the borrower has to be texted a passcode to open the email. If you're sending attachments, business attachments, somebody's tax returns, somebody's personal documents, in Adobe Acrobat, under File Properties is a security tab. You can change the settings in the security tab to add a password. Please don't ever send the password to the document in the attached document or in the email with the document attached to it. Send a separate email. And then remember that we all, these days, can use software sharing systems that do require access and validation. Dropbox, Google Docs, OneDrive, and Google Drive are all excellent methods to send documentation. The trick to doing this is that you can see, with the added clicks that I've described in the last 2 slides, is it takes a little bit of time. And time being what it is in our industry and being worth so much money, it's very difficult sometimes to slow down enough to be sure to take all of the proper access. But I encourage you to think about stopping, slowing your roll just a moment to make sure that you're secure. Now let's talk about VPNs for a minute, the virtual private network. When you ask the question, what is it? Do I need one? VPN services are, I like to describe it as, if you've watched any of the Mission Impossible or any of the current crime shows on TV, they're always trying to trace the call, and the call seems like it's bouncing from server to server, from location to location, and they're trying to track it down. A VPN is a series of servers built to skew your data. to make it harder for a hacker to track down or break into your data, because you're not at that point using one server, you're using a series of servers. You can get a VPN, and a VPN and accessing your VPN looks just like accessing a Wi-Fi access portal. You get what you pay for. The Nord VPN that I use is $8.99 a month for 10 devices. And that's not very expensive. And I cover all of my devices and all of my husband's devices for that cost. I highly encourage you to check out vpnmentor.com. They're a third-party vendor that does a rating service. It's like the Angie's List of VPNs. How do we stop this from happening? How do you make sure that you're absolutely safe and that you keep your clients' data absolutely safe? And the short answer is we don't. This slide is always much more impressive with music in the background, and I'm not going to sing to you today because that would be annoying. But the short answer is you don't. What you can do, though, is to protect yourself and your customers by being aware, paying pretty close attention to what you click on and what you're looking at. Use the tools you have and lock your data. In your email and computer access exposure, if you use encrypted email, if you install and use a VPN, and if you have an active antivirus and anti-malware scanner on your computer, you should stay relatively safe. When we talk about password exposure, I strongly encourage you not to use the Google password saver because Google has already been hacked once. Find yourself FastPass or one of the access points to save your passwords and make them more complicated. The more complicated can be using special characters instead of letters, the number 3 instead of an E, the @ symbol instead of an A. Make it more complicated. Rather than using your children or your pets' names, use the first letter of a phrase that means something to you. The I'm going to make $1 million in 2020. Use the first letter of all of those in 2020. Be very diligent and very careful. When it's password protection, the ones that are encrypted, Kathy, are the better encryption methods. FastPass is what I use. My Nord VPN has a Nord password protector, so sometimes your VPN provider will have a password keeper for you. When we talk about your debit, bank, and credit cards, everybody knows to watch for skimmers, right? When you pull up to the gas pump, pay inside, which takes away all the convenience of paying outside. One of the easy things to do is to use the credit function instead of the debit function. Don't ever enter your PIN unless you're at the bank. Use credit, credit, credit. 2 reasons. The first is once they have your PIN, the bank has no way to tell if it was you or not you. The second thing is that when you use the credit function on your debit card, if you use your PIN number, the bank fraud protection unit has to refund your money, and that can take up to 30 days legally. But if you use the credit function, then the Visa or MasterCard fraud protection units have to recover you, and they guarantee repayment in 3 days while the fraud investigation is going on. Servers in restaurants and paper data. How many of you still have paper data? This is me smiling at you. How many of you still have paper files somewhere? Ooh, good job, nobody raised a hand. Yay. I saw that. So the fun of paper data is when you're in the restaurant and your paper is everywhere, it's real easy for somebody to take a picture of what you're doing, right? Can walk through with my cell phone and video you and blow it up and see what's on that paper. Just be careful. Change out your card data often. I say that the same way I say that update your virus scan often. If you've not run the update on your virus scan and you don't have automated updates that run every day, then you're not as protected as you could be. And the last piece of that is watch your stored services, your apps and your electronic wallets. Computer and phone safety. Where do you keep your computer? Where do you store your phone overnight? Are they with you, or are they in the bag in your car? Watch where you leave your things, right? How many of us plug our laptops in at the office and then immediately walk away to go to lunch and leave it open? Those are the things that you could be really careful about, because access is access. If your computer or your laptop were to be stolen, do you have a kill switch on it? Most Apple products have the kill switch available, but you have to activate it in order to use it. So be really careful with those things. When we talk about protecting your business, consistency with client data is the key. Warn your clients early and often to protect and secure their data. Ensure your associated vendors have their security and are responsible with their data transmission. With this, one of the biggest things that we see in this is when you're transmitting data for a client to a lender or to a bank or to the title company. If you're sending wiring data so that somebody can effectively make their transfer, how do you know that the vendor on the other end or that the client on the other end has been responsible with their data transmission? The only way you know is to warn and to check, right? And then we always smile and say, use the technology to help protect your passwords, protect your information, protect your client's information. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, called IC3, is the national database for cybercrime. If you ever are the victim of a cyber theft, IC3 is who you reach out to while you reach out to your local authorities. In 2019, they reported 467,361 complaints of suspected internet crime, with reported losses in excess of $3.5 billion. That's a lot of money. And most of that was in $10,000 to $25,000 increments where people tried to effect fraud. When you break it down, the top 3 crime types reported by those victims were non-payment or non-delivery. That's where the money got diverted. Extortion, basic blackmail, or personal data breach. Lawsuits from consumers often target real estate professionals. Courts are finding liability and awarding against companies and individuals, so we want to be really careful that we know what data we're transmitting and that we don't inadvertently misdirect or expose data. Just make sure that your speed and your anxiety at the end of a real estate transaction are not causing you to be lax in security, because that's what's driving those numbers up. We smile and say, don't be next. The link at the bottom is the case study out of the Houston area where the wire got diverted. Was a $255,000 wire that got diverted. And it was the real estate agent whose email was compromised that the hacker used to send different wiring instructions to a client and divert a wire. That agent was found liable in that case. And so that's why we say this is really an important issue for commercial, for residential, for all of us. We just want to be really careful. And that takes us to about the 45-minute mark. Are there any other questions that I can answer? Anything specifically that you're wondering?
Yeah, thank you, Robin. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to speak up.
Just try it.
Woohoo, no question. Yay.
I do have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
The name of the antivirus software that you had mentioned?
Kaspersky.
How do you spell it?
Kaspersky. Kaspersky.
Okay. Thank you.
Alan? Hello? I'm not getting there at all.
Dallas, are you talking?
Yeah, trying to.
I can hear you barely. Be a hair louder and tell me what you need.
Go ahead, Dallas.
Okay, the question I was going to ask was the cell phone antivirus for non-Apple.
So most of the major antivirus softwares have mobile or phone versions. Kaspersky is the one that I use. The Kaspersky download on Apple product is still a little sketchy. So I trade that out now and again with just plain Norton antivirus. Apple software is pretty robust though. I've never found a challenge on my Apple product.
Yeah, I was looking for Samsung in particular.
Let me do a little research for you and I can shuttle that back through TR to you.
Okay, second comment I wanted to make is whenever I started getting those UPS/labor account/whatever phishing attempts, the best advice I got was never click on the link in the email. Go log into your account separately through your browser or whatever, but don't use the email links.
That's exactly correct. And I would tell you the same thing with Netflix. Go back through the app. Go through your access, not through the email, ever. Mario, you would ask for suggestions on cyber insurance. I'm not allowed to make suggestions from this venue. And Louis, I note your concerns with Kaspersky. I know that they had looked into it, but at this point, Kaspersky hasn't been more than proven to have any kind of challenges. So that you all know, Kaspersky was Russian created, and there was a theory that Kaspersky would be monitoring all of your stuff for influence or for theft. Just be aware. Norton and McAfee both have added robust features to their software. I don't promote necessarily one over the other. Just do your homework. Find out what you are comfortable with. And Manuel, the opinion on pay apps in the smartphones, I would tell you that every app has its own list of challenges or list of features with it. My concern with the pay apps is what all did you give access to? Some of the authorizations that we ourselves give when we install an app would startle us if we realized what we were giving access to. I don't know why Candy Crush needs to hear my microphone, but the permission in Candy Crush was that it could access any of my pictures, all of my contact lists, and have access to my microphone. I thought that was interesting. and then Nord. Nord is the VPN system that I use. And if you go to vpnmentor.com, you can look and see the ratings currently for the top 10 VPNs suggested. Fun thing about using the VPN is when you have a tech system behind you like I do, make sure that when you're on your VPN that you don't look like you're outside the country. Trying to pull credit for a borrower when my VPN says I'm in Belgium is a problem. My IT people call me and yell really loudly when that happens. Richard, for the products like Alexa and Google Mini, I would tell you that I'm not any more worried about Alexa than I am about the cell phone I'm holding in my hand. Again, I would challenge that if you go through your permissions on your cell phone to everything that you've downloaded, 90% of the apps you've downloaded have taken access to your microphone and can hear everything you say on your phone. So for me, Alexa doesn't hear any more or less than my cell phone does. My concern with Alexa is more that conversations that I assume to be private in my house may not be. And people can also project into those speakers. I think we've all seen the video of them talking to the kids. So it's it's just a thing to be aware of, right? What did you give permission for? And then Ms. Miriam, the antivirus for your iPhone, I would say check out the antivirus on your computer and see if they have a mobile version. Use the one that you're comfortable with. Ms. Monica, it's the password on your printer. If the printer is already set up and functioning, your printer should have a menu option to allow you to add security to the Wi-Fi if it's wireless. If you can't find it easily, if you Google it, there is most likely a YouTube description on how to do it. And to the anonymous attendee, should we avoid wire transfer for residential transactions? How these wires are being stolen is that people are being given incorrect wire information after the official data has been transmitted. Wires are perfectly safe as long as somebody, while they're at the bank, calls the title company to validate the wiring instruction. So we smile and say, you can use a wire, but you have to take the time to stop and call and validate the instructions before you send the wire and release it. Thank you, Louis. That's good. I'm going to check that out. If Senator Rubio said it, it's worth checking out. Let's find out. Anybody else?
Also, just a reminder to everyone, this webinar has been recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel as well. All right, well, thank you, Robin, so much. This was a great presentation, a lot of great questions. Like I said, this has been recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel as well as on our website.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin. And thank you everyone for attending.